in real time?
NOAA's website gives us that. Our control center will be in, will do that for the location and give it to our operations emergency response team.
NOAA is what?
National Oceanic Atmospheric. That's the one who does all the atmosphere stuff, the air monitoring. They can tell us what the wind directions are, what the speed is, what the humidity is, temperature, and all that.
And those are based on either readings at airports or some other place like that? Or is that done from a satellite?
I guess I don't know how it's done. I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know the details of how they get to those numbers.
Have you ever had a spray permit, or are you familiar with spray permits in terms of agriculture and when you can and cannot spray, and the wind speeds and how variable that can be when you're standing on the road versus down in the ditch?
I understand that, but I'm not aware of it now.
Okay, so wouldn't it be better to let those decisions be made at the local level because they know the ground and the air more intimately than NOAA?
I agree with that.
Okay.
And that is part of our training.
Bottom of page 8, and you continue on to page 9. I'm going to just more or less focus on the top of page 9 of your rebuttal testimony. There's some discussion in your rebuttal answer here about odorants to alert, I guess, folks that there's something out in the air that could be harmful to them, right?
Correct.
And I understand that an odorant in the pipeline could be problematic for Summit. Is that kind of the gist of it?
It could be problematic for first responders for a CO2 pipeline. For the product being inert, like it is a non-flammable, if I put the same odorant that natural gas has in it, that smell, that's called mercaptan, and that's a flammable. So if I put that in there, then I have introduced a new product, so now I have a flammable product like natural gas is.
Was there no odorant that's non-flammable? I'm not saying mixing it inside the pipe, but outside somewhere, that when there's an alarm goes off, then this smell is dispersed so that people know there's a problem.
We've never addressed it that way. That sounds like it could work. I don't know how we would get it there. If on your scenario.
Okay. All right, let's look at your rebuttal exhibit number 2 on page 20 of 39. I'm just going to start here at the sentence, should notification be received of high-risk incident? Who's receiving this notification?
Control center.
And what kind of notification is the control center receiving?
What's happening on the pipeline?
All right, so let's say there's a drop in pressure somewhere.
Right. That's an alarm for the control center that tells them that they have an issue, like an incident on the pipeline.
And is this going to be, and I understand it, from my understanding, this control center is in Ames, Iowa.
That's correct.
So it's a physical location.
Correct.
And is there a human being at the physical location?
Yes, sir.
24/7?
Yes, sir.
365?
Yes, sir.
All right. And when this alarm goes off, I'm just kind of picturing a panel of buttons, red buttons, and when the alarm goes off, they know right where the problem is.
It's going to be monitors like this with the pipeline system on it, and there'll be several operators in there managing their sections of the pipeline, and all the gauges are showing up on that. And once the alarm goes off, like you said, that one will be identified, and that shows exactly where the pipeline segment is and the valves within that segment. So they follow their procedure for shutdown system,
So is a segment defined by
just like it is on that map you saw this morning.
one valve to the next downstream valve?
No, the segments
are smaller than
Yes,
the
sir.
valve to valve.
Gentlemen, just to make sure the record is clean, can we just make sure we're not talking over one
I'm
another?
sorry.
Finish each other's sentences.
Sorry on it.
Sorry.
How big is a segment?
I don't remember how big the segments are. How long? You talking about how far apart they are?
Yeah, how many miles?
Well, they're not miles. I can't recall. I'm sorry. It's not. It's on that dispersion modeling.
Okay. So let's say segment 1 has a problem. An alarm goes off. Control center knows that there's a problem in segment 1. What is the control center operator going to do?
Well, there's a shutdown procedure for the pipeline. They'll follow that procedure and start the shutdown. They will notify by PSAP.
I don't want to talk over you, so I'm just going to kind of, as you get along, you get rolling.
I know, sir. I'm sorry.
All right. So you said there's a shutdown procedure. Does the operator at the control center, are they involved in that shutdown procedure, or has that already automatically commenced through some form of technology?
The technology is automatic valves that they initiate from the control center.
Okay. So the operator has to initiate.
He does.
Now it says here of a high risk incident. That should notification be received of a high risk incident. And if we go back to page 16 of Exhibit 2, there's a distinction made between high risk and low risk. Who makes that determination?
It should be listed on here. The definition of high risk and low risk.
I mean, the alarm goes off. It doesn't determine. The alarm isn't determining whether it's high or low, correct?
No.
So how does the person at the control center know what's happening and whether it's high or low? Do they make a phone call?
They'll call the operations team on site out in the field.
Where are they at 2 a.m.?
I can't answer. They're at home, I'm assuming.
And where's their home? In Hardin County, or
it will be?
Somebody's going to live in Hardin County?
Yes, sir.
All right. So they're going to get a call. They're going to put their boots on. They're going to go out to that segment.
Right.
And then they're going to assess it and call the operations center. And then operations center is going to go further down on their checklist. Is that basically what's going to happen?
It's a little... No, not exactly.
Okay, where am I wrong?
So the high risk of the full breach of the pipeline, they'll know that by the valving on their screen. If they lose all the pressure on the line, that's a guillotine release.
Right.
If it's a slow leak and they pick it up, they'll know by the gauges are still operating, still picking up pressure. So that would be a low risk.
And when there's a low risk, from what I saw on page 20, it just stays, that response stays within Summit. It does not go outside of Summit. No outside response efforts are made. Is that right?
Possibly, yes.
I mean, that's what Exhibit 2, page 20, would suggest to me, that these steps initiate only when there's a high risk.
For outside resources, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Until they're confirmed.
Okay, how long could it take to confirm?
Between 15 and 30 minutes, typically.
Okay. Does that include how long it took the resident guinea pig or canary to put his boots on and go out and check?
I can't answer that at this point. I don't know where they're going to be living, and I don't know where the pipeline is going to breach at.
Well, I mean, there's 35 miles of it in Hardin County.
There may be operators in different locations of Hardin County.
Okay. But that's about 30 minutes lost to a first responder then, isn't it?
It could be.
Wouldn't it make sense that as soon as that alarm goes off at the control center, an alarm goes off in Hardin County, so people can get out of their beds, put their boots on, fire up that ambulance, get that fire engine warmed up, get an officer in patrol to start closing down roads, because this may be bigger than
we think, and that could happen. We could do that in our training.
I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, if
it
we're willing
depends
to
on
do
their
it,
capabilities too.
if we're willing to do it, you're not going to get in our way, are you?
Oh, absolutely not.
So if we request that we want an alarm that goes off when your alarm goes off, you'd give us that.
Yes, sir.
Now, what's the plan for letting folks know? Will that alarm go off somehow for them too at the same time?
The R911, reverse 911 system that we're going to use, SendNote now, it's a program. We plan on utilizing that based on counties. There are other counties that have already told me, emergency managers, they have their own system. We'll incorporate that system in ours. So it's not a big deal.
It's like an app on a phone that your phone.
It is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, sir.
In terms of notifying travelers, because this thing's going to cross 65 twice, 175 I think once, 20 it's going to cross. It's going to cross 40 secondary roads. How do we notify travelers?
In the initial response tactic, the sheriff's department will probably address most of that as far as blocking roads and that would inform travelers that the road's being blocked before a reason.
Could an Amber Alert system go out over the radio?
It could.
Because this pipeline is going to be within less than a mile of the western edge of Eldora, and on the western side of the city of Eldora is the Boys State Training School, houses 70 plus students and 30 or more staff, and about a quarter mile east of that is the South Hardin High School. And so what are they going to be notified in the same manner as you've described?
Yes, sir.
What about Hardin County has a lot of natural wildlife areas and camping and river. How are the campgrounds going to be notified? Could there be a light of some sort, like a lighthouse at these campsites when that alarm goes off down there in Ames, that this lighthouse, I'm just metaphorically speaking about some kind of a lighthouse, goes off and there's a color, maybe green, that might be appropriate, it would illuminate. And then people in that area know, because campgrounds tend to be by rivers and lakes, and those are lower areas where this gas could travel. And that would you be willing to do something like that and have the board require that?
Absolutely. Anything the first responders identify, which emergency managers as well for Hardin County, that they identify that we need to do, we will evaluate and do on how to do it.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grunhagen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. Hi, how are you today?
Good.
My name is Chris Grunhagen. I believe we met back in June, if you recall.
I do.
When you sat for some depositions. In preparing for today, did you have a chance to review your deposition testimony?
I did.
Okay. And do you recall us talking a little bit about the public awareness campaign
Yes.
that you were planning?
Yes.
Okay. Could the staff please bring up his Mr. Dillon's deposition testimony? And while they're doing that, I'll go ahead and ask about your rebuttal testimony. In your rebuttal testimony, you talk about Summit engaging a company called Paradigm.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is their role?
Public awareness meetings, county per county.
Are those public awareness meetings with first responders or with the public?
Public awareness, yes. Well, the first responders will be there as well. Pipeline companies will be there. It's a program that they've developed for Iowa. It's already being utilized for all the other pipeline companies, and we'll just be part of that.
Okay. So are they going to have, your rebuttal testimony says you're going to have quarterly updates. What does that mean?
Quarterly meetings is the, in the state, they have quarterly meetings that they manage and send out flyers, have a dinner, and it brings everybody together basically so we can all discuss what our specific pipelines do and for the public's knowledge.
So these quarterly meetings, are they just held in one location in the state? Or are they held in each county?
They're not all in one county. I mean, not each county at the same quarter. They'll change counties. They'll move around within the state.
Okay. So the quarterly updates, there'll be one meeting in the state somewhere in one of the counties. Is that what I'm understanding?
Every month they'll do one somewhere. So that it would be quarterly. So if your county did it in January, you'll do it again in March. But they'll have other counties doing it in February or April. So January, March, and April, May, June, yeah.
So just making sure I'm understanding what you're testifying to. So you're planning quarterly meetings in every county on a rotating basis.
Correct.
Okay. So one county's quarters won't be lined up with another.
Correct. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think they have the personnel for all that.
That's why I was asking.
Okay.
Okay. So in your, let's go to page 39 of the deposition testimony. And I guess just to clarify, for the record, are all the depositions been entered into evidence? Yeah.
Not sure. So if you want to go ahead and do it one by one, Mr. Dublinsky's light is already up.
Well, we've had this a couple times. My understanding is that they were all introduced at the same time, all the depositions and all of the public and confidential exhibits. I don't care either way. We can keep doing them one by one, but I do believe they were all introduced at once.
Let's do this. Ms. Grunhagen, if you'd like to make that motion now, we can, and we will double check the record and clear this up so that we can have this conversation only once or twice more.
Yes, there's been some confusion. That's why I asked the question. So
Several days ago.
I'd like to offer Mr. Dillon's deposition into evidence.
Is there objection?
No objection.
Seeing none, we will. The board will admit and give it the weight due.
Thank you. And so when we talked during your deposition, when you were talking public awareness, you were referencing the one call program. Do you recall
That's
that?
part of it, yes.
Okay, so that's just one part of it, not the entirety of it.
That is correct.
So other than the quarterly meetings and the flyers that Paradigm is going to send out, what else is involved in the public awareness campaign?
Dinner. There's scenarios developed while we're there. Each pipeline company will have a scenario-based release to, the tabletop exercise.
So the public will be involved in the
Oh, yeah.
tabletop exercise, or is it just first responders?
Oh, it's the first responders involved in it, but the public gets to see it happening.
So the public is invited to watch it?
Yes, ma'am. And have dinner.
Okay. And is there going to be any radio campaigns promoting calling 811?
I do believe I've seen radio ads in to address inviting people to it, the public, and there is the flyers that's getting sent out that gives them the schedule for each county and when they're going to have, where they're going to have it and stuff like that. I've not seen the radio ads, but I can find out what that looks like from Paradigm.
So are those promoting the public gatherings with dinner, or are those promoting more call 811 if you were to dig?
It's promoting the meeting.
Okay.
The 811 is discussed during the meeting.
Okay. So is Summit doing anything to promote calling 811?
Beyond that, we probably, I haven't talked to our public affairs department, but they are doing it now. They have public engagement meetings that we go through the system constantly, and there is 811 staple on everything.
Are there any plans to inform or train, provide equipment to some of those landowners that are located in close proximity to the pipeline, but perhaps were not under easement for the pipeline?
That are not on the easement?
Yes. There are some houses that are within 300 feet of the pipeline, but they did not sign an easement.
We're not addressing that. I mean, it can happen based on my meetings and training with first responders. There's a lot to depend on that. I mean, I don't know what kind of equipment they're thinking about, like an SCBA or something. That's a lot to tell somebody to put on.
If someone is living across the road from the location of a pipeline, is Summit going to be educating them about what to look for if there's a rupture?
That's part of the public awareness meetings, yes.
Is there going to be any specific outreach to those residents?
That are not on our route? Is that what you're asking me?
Other than your general come one, come all to the dinner, is there going to be specific outreach to the people that are living in close proximity to the pipeline?
Yes.
And what is that outreach going
That's going to be the same as the resident that's on our pipeline, because they're so close to it. If that's what you're asking
That's
me,
what I'm asking.
yeah, they'll be sent the same information as the landowner of our pipeline.
And is the letter that you provided in rebuttal exhibit 3, I believe, is that the letter that you're going to be sending to those folks?
Well, this public awareness program, that's just our program.
Okay.
We do have our public affairs, public engagement director. She does send out all kinds of leaflets and stuff to residents today, and she'll continue that outreach as well.
So is this the kind of letter that would be sent to the people that live in close proximity to the pipeline?
Well, this is our program in general, but it's not really a letter. It's going to look different than this. It's going to address all this, absolutely.
So can you explain to me how does this make it the program versus just an informational piece?
So, well, PHMSA requires a program, and we've made a program based on the requirements. But there's going to be a lot more details than just 811. There's going to be design aspects of where the pipeline is, map maybe, nearest them, and what our response effort's going to look like. I've been a first responder, and walking up to a house and a turnout gear and an air pack on without informing them what's going on, that's a little scary to little kids. So it's just something we do for within the fire department as well. We'll schedule stuff in fire departments with the public, like October stuff, when Fire Prevention Week. That will be part of that as well.
Are those public relations activities or public awareness activities?
Public affairs, public relations, public awareness, everything. It all works together.
Understood. So if someone's going to planning on digging a new fence line, are you going to recommend that they call 811, or are you going to recommend that they call Summit?
811.
And why is that?
That's the law.
Okay, very good. Is Summit going to have an 800 number available for landowners to call if they see something?
Yes, ma'am. It's going to be on our right-of-way signs. It'll be on these documents that we send out on our public awareness program.
Okay, one more question. Can you scroll down to page 44? Go back to the deposition and scroll down to page 44. Do you remember me asking you about livestock? I think you were surprised that I'd asked the question at the time.
I think so. I don't remember it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Being that the pipeline is running, the route is across northern Iowa, is it logical to assume there's going to be livestock in the area?
I would say so.
Has Summit made any provisions for training first responders on how to handle livestock that are in the area of a potential exposure?
Since you mentioned it, I will. It's a fluid plan for everything that we could possibly come up with. I would assume that a lot of farmers are volunteer fire department, and they'll probably ask me as well, and we will address it.
Thank you.
We'll address anything.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Jorde next. Mr. Meyer, did you have a follow-up? Just double check. Go ahead, Mr. Jorde.
Thank you. Would you agree that the risk to people and livestock increase the closer they are to where the release point of the CO2 would be?
Depends on the wind direction.
Sure. If the wind was blowing away, maybe not so much, but say there's no wind, you would agree that proximity to the hazard itself increases risk, right?
It does.
And the detection level, what's the detection sensitivity of your monitoring equipment that you would have at this command center?
The command center?
Well, response center, whatever, wherever.
The control center in
Sure.
Ames?
Sure, wherever anyone who's supposed to monitor releases.
I don't know the sensitivity details of that, sir.
And you're aware, certainly though, based on your experience, that the monitors, there's no monitors out there that monitor for 100% sensitivity, correct?
On the pipeline itself for leaks?
Right.
I know that.
Okay. So even if you have the best of the best monitoring equipment, you're aware that there could be a slow leak somewhere or multiple places that could avoid detection, right?
From that system, yes.
Yes, okay.
We have other systems. Obviously, we have our pipeline right-of-way technicians, aerial patrols.
The aerial patrols might be a little difficult to see a colorless substance, right?
They could see the ice ball on the ground, like dead vegetation, air blowing. If it's the product blowing out and it's
Right.
very small,
Right.
you can see the dirt flying. I mean, just like the line riders would when they're riding the line.
And
There's certain indications that you're right. It's a colorless, but there still will be some indication that there's a release.
you had quite a bit of testimony here devoted to addressing Mr. Jerry Briggs. I take it you had an opportunity to review Mr. Briggs' testimony and the exhibits and his opinions and kind of recounting his experience in Satarsha. Is that right?
I did.
We would offer exhibits 487, 488, 489, and 490.
Thank you. Is there objection?
Largely just, honestly, I don't have them all memorized. I don't know exactly what those four are. Other than that, I will state the objection I had previously that traditionally we bring those in at the time when we can cross-examine the witness that's sponsoring them. And I understand that the court has allowed things in, or chair has allowed things in subject to that objection previously, but I want to state it for the record.
Okay, thank you. The board will admit Jorde landowner hearing exhibit 47, 48, 49, and 490 and give it the weight due.
You were asked some questions about odorants, and you said that's not something, at least within the pipeline itself, that someone is planning on. Were you aware that Navigator has separately and publicly stated that they are working with Penn State University to look into the availability of an odorant to help with detection?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
If there were such a technology that would not make the combined substance in the pipeline flammable, would Summit be willing to add an odorant?
We would definitely entertain something like that, but it would have to be more than just flammable. I mean, if it's corrosive, obviously we don't want that either. But you are correct. We would entertain something like that, but that doesn't mean we would do it.
On your rebuttal exhibit number 1, it's a listing you call the log of Summit/County Emergency Manager meetings, and you've got a list of the counties there that you go through. Do you have a list of the number of emergency responders or their identity per county?
About first responders?
Yes, sir.
I do not. I mean, I don't. At this point, they haven't given that to me as far as all of the responders that would respond on our pipeline right away. So I'm saying it that way because if a responder is too far away from our pipeline, I don't know if the county emergency manager would require them to be part of our training. I would like them to be, just for mutual aid purposes, but it's really up to the emergency managers, and they haven't given me that list, no, sir.
Well, have you asked for that list?
I have. I mean, we've talked about it, and they are supposed to be getting me equipment needs and forwarding that to me. I'm coordinated with emergency managers for simplicity of the system because they know everybody, and I will also schedule with them for the training as well. So they're a big part of these guys right here, a big part of my outreach for that.
Within the state of Iowa and the counties where you propose to have a footprint, do you know which, by county, which fire departments are volunteer versus career?
to a fact. I can assume because of the size of the cities, like Sioux City is definitely paid.
Do you think it's reasonable for Summit to rely on the taxpayers of Iowa to fund the initial emergency response should anything happen with Summit's asset or its pipeline?
The taxpayers are not funding this. We will pay for them.
You're going to pay for the salaries of all the first responders?
We will pay for their equipment and salaries used on our response.
Okay, so let me just be clear. You're committing, for instance, to accept an invoice from each county for the time that any of their emergency responders, whether volunteer or career, spent responding to and dealing with any type of emergent event related to your pipeline?
To our pipeline, yes, sir.
Okay, is there a cap on the per hour rate that you will agree to pay?
Portal to portal.
Okay,
Pulling out of the garage, pulling back in the garage.
all right. And is that commitment in writing in any contract that you will sign and be a party to, meaning you Summit with the counties?
I don't have a contract. It'll be descripted into the response planning, training. If you want me to do that, I'll talk to my boss and see what we can do with that.
Are you aware if what you just committed to is already state law, already a requirement?
No, sir, I didn't know that. Isn't that interesting?
So in terms of, you said you're looking into grants, I guess you called it grants for safety equipment, self-contained breathing apparatus, and other things. That was for the first responders, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And obviously we can agree that the first responders are those individuals that the communities in Iowa entrust to go to the hazard, to assess, to see if there's any damage to persons or property, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what's your commitment to the people that would actually be the first impacted? That would be the people nearest to an event. Are you going to be providing self-contained breathing apparatuses for all residents and persons within, say, a mile of the pipeline?
I can't answer that question today. It's really not in my scope as far as supplying the general public SCBAs. That's, well, I don't even know that even the first responders would want that, but it would be something we would address, obviously, to ensure the safety of the public and bring back to our attorney to determine what's the liability with that. Because if you don't know how to wear an air pack and you're not physically fit to wear an air pack, you shouldn't be wearing an air pack. There's a lot to an air pack. I mean, you have to be physically fit to wear it. So if I just supply that, you're committing me to something that might cause more harm.
So for the elderly and persons living, say, in a farmstead that is hosting, whether unwillingly or via an easement, hosting this hazardous pipeline, your statement to them would be, you're not physically fit enough, so you don't get an air pack.
I'm sure I didn't say it that way, but
okay. Well, so then back to my first question, you would agree that it would be reasonable and responsible for your company, which is going to retain the profits from operation if this is granted, to equip any resident within a mile of the proposed pipeline with self-contained breathing apparatus, right?
I'm not going to commit to that here, sir. I will evaluate it with the first responders and my attorney to determine if that's okay for the first responders would make that decision more than me. I will talk to them about it and see what their thoughts are, because they're the one that's got to rescue them as well if we hurt them because of an SCBA. So there's a lot to it than just your question. I'm sorry, I just can't answer it in the way you want.
So again, you're leaving the decision as to potentially life-saving safety devices not to the people in harm's way, but to those persons that may be 30 or minutes more away in responding to that harm, right?
No, I'm not saying that either.
What about CO2 monitors? You could at least today commit on behalf of Summit to provide CO2 monitors, in-home, in-building monitors for any residence or occupied structure or business within a mile of the pipeline, right?
I'm not committing to that as well. We have talked about it and we are evaluating it, but that's not something that we could say we would do right now.
And so the value of your statement that you have talked about it and you're evaluating it is really nothing unless you follow through. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. On your emergency response plan, you're familiar, of course, that PHMSA only regulates or requires that the company have an emergency response plan for the company, correct?
It is the response plan for the company, correct?
That's right. There's no PHMSA or federal restrictions stating that Hardin County, for instance, can't have its own emergency response plan, right?
Some counties do, you're right.
And in order for the county to have the most robust and accurate and up-to-date emergency response plan for the county, they would need to know the dispersion analysis and the modeling that so far your company has refused to make public, correct?
Our company has not made that public, correct?
Right, and so that got us halfway there, but you would agree that the emergency response plan on a countywide basis can only be as good as the information they have to draw on, and if Summit is preventing them from being able to plan for worst case scenarios, then obviously Summit is not doing its job to help the counties as best it could, right?
We will educate first responders in county to meet the requirements of their response plan. Yes, we will.
Mm-hmm. Now that you didn't really answer my
Well, we will
question.
develop it. We will not submit our dispersion modeling to them. We will evaluate the dispersion modeling with them, review it, and explain to them what has to happen, just part of the training. It will be in the initial response tactics on what they're going to do. They can include that into their county emergency response plan. That's what I would suggest they do, because that does answer every question for every segment of the pipeline and can be put into their county emergency response plan.
Well, it kind of answers the question, assuming it is worst case scenario, but would you commit to giving the exact distance, as we discussed with Mr. Luke, of the hazard distance per pipeline segment per diameter of pipe? Just give them the number so they can kind of game plan their resources.
That is part of the tactic, yes, sir. Okay. To know exactly what's in the pipe, how much is breached from the pipe on different scenarios, based on wind conditions, where it's going, all that will be discussed and all that would be put in our tactic to be put into their county emergency response plan.
And the exact hazard distance from the pipe for the worst case scenario, meaning say if it's 3,000 feet or 5,000 feet, however many feet it is from that a plume could travel from the pipe, you'll tell them that exact distance.
Based on atmospheric conditions, we will do that.
Okay, very good. Now, if it's good enough for the first responders that are responding to the people in peril, it obviously would be important for the people in peril to also have that data, correct?
And they will get that during public awareness meetings.
Okay. Any reason why, if you're going to give it to them in public awareness meetings, if you claim you are going to let people know that number in the future, and assuming your consultant did it correctly so that number will not materially change, there's no reason that data can't be shared right now, correct?
Well, the data isn't going to be shared right now because we haven't started our training for the first responders who are part of that town.
Okay, but that's your arbitrary triggering
It is.
a point. Yeah, so that doesn't answer the question.
Okay.
The point being, if this is, you've already stated this is important information for first responders to have. You've stated it's going to be part of a public awareness. Let's make the public aware right now. Will you commit to doing that today?
No, sir.
All right. And is that kind of indicative to your commitment, your company's commitment to the public and their safety?
No, sir.
Okay. Your draft emergency response plan right now is approximately 39 pages. When it's quote unquote complete or operations ready, how many pages would you suspect that might get up to?
100.
All right, so we're about a third of the way there, roughly. Would you say?
Sure.
All right, I don't think I have anything further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Long, your placard was up for a while. It's down. Do you have questions?
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? I think ours were answered. Hold on.
Mr. Dillon, I just want to expand on something you talked about earlier. So you've been in the business for 38 years, correct?
Correct.
So what kind of technological advances have you seen when it comes to detection, communication? Do you stay up to date on the technology that's out there? How do you, what's the industry move to?
Not really. I haven't kept up with it other than I know I have a cell phone now that I never used to have, and I got an app on it that I can be alerted for everything I never used to have back in the 80s. So the 811 system is the law now than it was in the past. The different programs for reverse 911 type of systems to alert iAlerts and stuff like that, that's new technology that's come out recently. I don't know when it came out, but it's within the last 10 years. And the pipeline control centers are all updated, of course, because of their technology with monitors and satellite links and battery powered, valves and stuff like that.
So I'm guessing, and maybe it's the same thing, but are you aware of wireless emergency alerts? Is that the reverse 911?
Yeah,
Okay.
Kind of like my app.
Okay, I just wondered if they were the same.
They are, sir.
And then another option, and I don't know if you've explored this at all, would be, if individuals were to actually sign up for text alerts. Is that something that's been considered or talked about?
Yes, sir. And our control center manager, he's already on top of all that, so he's already started all that. As far as downloading the programs into our control center that we're going to have, I think you work for us or something.
Okay. All right. I think that was the only thing I wanted to expand on.
Mr. Dillon, you mentioned adding an odorant like mercaptan would make the CO2 mixture flammable.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the terms lower explosive limit and upper explosive limit?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what concentration mercaptan would typically be in a pipeline?
I'd have to look at the safety data sheet for that. I'm not aware
And
right off my head.
so are you aware if it would be above the lower explosive limit?
No, I'm not.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay. Summit, redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You may step down, Mr. Dillon. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Got a better clip now, so appreciate that. Would very much like to get through. You've got two more?
We have Brigham McCown can't be in town until tomorrow, he teaches at Miami University. Tuesday night is flying right now. We can either do Mr. Powell if there's still a desire to have him come back for more closed, or we have John Godfrey.
Okay. I assume the parties are wanting to get Mr. Powell in confidential at some point.
Well, I'll speak for myself. I think we could get through Godfrey and probably still have time for Mr. Powell confidential rather than sending people in and out. That would be my vote.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Okay, let's move on to Mr. Godfrey,
All right.
please.
Senate calls witness John Godfrey.